I met your wife. She's very nice. Is she an entertainer?
She's on the show. She's one of my major guests and is in the audience tonight. I don't know if we can...
Well, sure we can.
Thank you. She's clapping now, even.
That's right.
Johnny Carson showed amazing talent in transforming his late-night television show into seemingly effortless entertainment genius. His uncanny skill to connect with his celebrity guests turned the program into an experience of casual friends. It felt like everyone was welcome. However, there were some performers with whom he could not connect, which led to moments during performances that had plenty of backstage discussion. These captivating stories were dramatic and a little crazy, and included a few big ones that are still remembered all these years later. Their intensely personal nature continues to enthrall viewers, but among all the stars who sat across from him, one friendship would shatter in public view. What really happened? Joan Rivers. From her humble beginnings, Joan Rivers initiated her voyage in the entertainment world with tremendous determination and relentless passion. Taking years to get ahead, the comedian struggled to make it big in stand-up comedy, seemingly forever beyond reach. Resilient in the face of failure, she first proved herself as a brilliant writer, not necessarily a performer. In 1965, her career path changed dramatically when she was booked onto The Tonight Show. Sitting across from the legendary Johnny Carson, she received a prophetic prediction that would alter her life's course. You're going to be a star.
February something, 1965, and on the air, he said you're going to be a star.
This catapulted her to places she never could have dreamed of. During that time, The Tonight Show was the #1 outlet for new talent into the entertainment world, and Carson was one of the most powerful men in the career decision-making process. His stamp of approval often sealed fame for whoever he approved. At the time, Rivers was known more as a literary figure than as a presence on stage. She had gone through endless struggles, sleeping in her car, working odd jobs, and even being rejected after one appearance on the Jack Paar Show.
First television appearance, I was brought up by an agent to the Jack Paar Show.
And so, when Carson praised her on the stage that millions watched every night, this was not so much flattery as official recognition from the most influential voice in television. After her breakout performance, Rivers's career landscape broadened significantly. Comedy club bookings exploded, and her working relationship with Carson developed into a formidable team. She became part of the writing staff, and by the 1980s, she had risen to the position of principal guest host. Whenever Carson took time off, Rivers stepped in for him. It seemed as though their professional relationship could not be broken, as he had even introduced her to Edgar Rosenberg, whom she would later marry. In 1968, when Rivers launched her daytime talk show, Carson continued to show his support by being her first guest. Behind the scenes, however, subtle fissures had started to emerge in their relationship. With the mid-1980s approaching, rumors were milling about concerning Carson's retirement. After more than 2 decades hosting The Tonight Show, much speculation revolved around who would succeed him. Given Rivers's vast tenure as a fill-in host for the show, it would have been reasonable to assume that she would be a candidate. When she obtained a list of 10 possible successors, however, her name was not included. At the same time, NBC was dragging its heels over renewing her contract, and Rivers was facing the fact that not only was she not making good money, but also was not being appreciated for her full worth. This was a pivotal moment because Fox gave Rivers an opportunity of a lifetime. The network offered her a chance to host her own late-night show.
And I am just so happy to be here, and I thank you all so much.
The Late Show starring Joan Rivers, with a 5-year guaranteed contract worth $15 million and a producing credit for her husband. That was groundbreaking because she would be the first female to host a late-night show in that competitive time slot. Although the offer was enticing, Rivers was apprehensive about accepting it. Her husband warned her that if she let the cat out of the bag to Carson too early, she might be blackballed in the industry before the ink on the agreement reached the paper. There was one problem. Carson's reputation for blacklisting comedians who ventured too close to competition was well documented. If the Fox deal collapsed, Rivers risked finding herself in professional limbo, robbed of both her new show and potential return opportunities. So, she waited until all the arrangements were in place before making the call. The telephone conversation that followed was devastating. "Johnny, it's Joan. I think I'm leaving the show. I have my show on Fox," she said. Carson hung up. When she tried calling again, he hung up again. Later, when asked about the exchange, Carson claimed it never happened, that he'd heard about her leaving via press release. A Tonight Show producer corroborated this version of events, telling the Los Angeles Times that he remained ignorant of Rivers's negotiations, even as she appeared on the show just days before her series announcement. The consequences of this break proved to be especially difficult. Rivers's Fox program faced an uphill battle from the moment it debuted in 1986. Her husband, now her producer, clashed consistently with network executives. Major stars avoided appearing, not because they disliked Rivers, but because they did not want to offend Carson. Some stations refused to air the show at all, in a show of support for Carson. Things reached a sad endpoint when Fox insisted Rivers fire her husband. When she refused, both were fired. This professional failure soon became a personal one, as her marriage began to unravel. 3 years later, Edgar Rosenberg succumbed to depression and took his own life. In spite of this awful series of events, Rivers showed amazing resilience. She re-emerged onto television in 1989 with The Joan Rivers Show, painstakingly working her way back from square one. During this time, Carson remained completely silent about her in public venues, including his final episodes of The Tonight Show. But as Rivers fought her way back, another Tonight Show regular was quietly tightening his grip on the stage. Who was he? Bob Hope. Those who watched The Tonight Show during its heyday in the 1970s and 80s may have spotted something odd. Bob Hope was a guest with astonishing regularity. His appearances were so predictable that whenever the orchestra played Thanks for the Memory, viewers could bet on Hope appearing from stage left. Often, he would show up unannounced, although everyone in the studio knew he was coming. He would go through his ritual of peppering the host with several carefully prepared jokes, engage in quasi-scripted banter, and always manage to work in clips from his latest NBC special. It was a ritual played out time and time again throughout the series. While the audience perhaps tittered politely at these familiar antics, Carson silently seethed behind his veneer of cool. This was not the classic Hollywood rivalry, replete with paparazzi and tabloid media attention. It remained pretty much contained within the inner workings of the show itself. The dynamic between Carson and Hope was akin to what most families endure with a respected elder who, over time, has paid their dues for a place at the table. Sometimes such family members develop certain expectations as to their place in the gatherings, no matter how uncomfortable their presence becomes. Bob Hope had become that person for Johnny Carson. The influence of Hope went far beyond his role as a television personality. A generation before Carson's success, Hope had already become an NBC institution. He started on the radio with The Pep Sodent Show, which dominated the airwaves as the #1 program from 1942 to 1944. When television came along, Hope made the transition into the new medium, churning out an astonishing 272 NBC specials over time. As late as the mid-1980s, when he had considerably faded as a star, he continued to work at a remarkable pace, producing 25 variety specials in a total of 5 years. In 1993, when he turned age 90, his energy finally began to flag. But he would produce several more specials before his death at age 100 in 2003. Given his decades-long tenure as NBC's golden child, the network basically gave Hope free rein on appearances on The Tonight Show.
Mr. Bob Hope.
As producer Peter Lasalle remembered, when Hope called up wanting to appear, Carson couldn't say no. But even as he would inwardly sigh at such requests, he always agreed. knowing it simply wasn't possible to say no to Hope. It wasn't because he and Carson were particularly close, or that their comedic styles meshed all that well. It was just that nobody was going to deny a legend the stage time he wanted. Behind the scenes, however, Carson had grave misgivings about Hope as a performer. While he genuinely admired Hope's legacy and his rightful place in the entertainment world, he found Hope's guest appearances increasingly difficult to work with. Hope insisted on bringing everything pre-written, every joke, every response, even his setups. By contrast, Carson was all about spontaneity, probing and exploring, and finding the moments through conversation. According to Andrew Nichols, Carson's former co-head writer, Johnny had a quickness of mind and was very well-read, having studied everything from Swahili and Russian to astronomy. He truly enjoyed guests who were like him, talking about the world, but found Hope's company singularly lacking. Matters were made even more difficult by Hope's promotional clips, which invariably ran longer than their time allocations. Where The Tonight Show would request 2-minute segments, Hope would turn up with 5 minutes of material. Additionally, producers frequently objected to the poor quality of the clips, which were reportedly cut with a rusty knife. As Hope's hearing and vision deteriorated in old age, conducting interviews became an increasingly awkward exercise. Carson was obliged to stick to pre-supplied questions, since any departure from these could elicit responses from Hope that bore no relation whatsoever to the actual questions. One incident that has stayed with many involved a particularly strong Carson monologue. During the commercial break, Hope came up to Carson and asked if he could use some of the monologue's laughter on his upcoming special. Carson assented, but when he watched the special at home, he was convinced that he could hear Ed McMahon's distinctive laugh behind one of Hope's punchlines. Moments like that wore heavily on Carson, who found these interactions incredibly enervating. Nichols recalls that Carson once turned to him and said, "If I ever end up like that, I want you to shoot me." For all these tensions, when NBC planned a grand 90th birthday celebration for Hope in 1993, Carson made a notable exception. He returned for the special, the only occasion he would deliver a monologue after retirement, though he did so with one condition: Hope must also perform a monologue. Beneath their complicated professional relationship, Carson maintained a deep-seated respect for Hope's enduring impact on entertainment. But as one legend's curtain gently fell, another performer's story took a shocking turn. How does a rising star go from adored guest to banned overnight, and why? Howie Mandel. In the high-pressure world of late-night television, where careers teeter perilously in the balance, the line between success and disaster is often paper-thin. This quite delicate balance, a single wrong step may easily topple one's career into an irreversible tailspin, was dramatically revealed in the incredible story of Howie Mandel.
And something happened between Judge Howie Mandel, to my left here,
You can just call me Howie.
Howie, and a hypnotist. Take a look.
From beloved fixture to persona non grata, on The Tonight Show, a true case study in the unforgiving nature of the medium itself. When he made that fateful 20-second appearance, Mandel was already one of the most consistent and in-demand comedians in late-night television. He had made 21 Tonight Show appearances under the guidance of Johnny Carson, truly an achievement in the entertainment business. Each of these appearances was a step toward enhancing his status as a multi-dimensional, funny performer, and placed him among a select group of performers Carson knew he could count upon to engage and entertain the viewing audience. The circumstances surrounding his final appearance were unusual right from the start. When the legendary Sammy Davis Jr. had to pull out because of health complications, Mandel received the coveted invitation on incredibly short notice. Though substituting for such an entertainment icon could prove daunting, Mandel had every reason to feel confident. After all, he'd proved himself time and again as a capable performer in this very venue. Whether due to the pressures of following such an icon or by way of crowd-pleasing, Mandel developed a high-end concept with the aid of an unforgettable prop, a 12-foot model of a saber-toothed tiger. Visually, the concept was breathtaking, practically much more difficult than imagined. The size and weight of the prop caused logistical issues that Mandel didn't quite see coming, and he had not, most importantly, discussed the essence of his routine ahead of time with Carson. It was a slip-up that would lead to the sequence of events that drastically changed Mandel's relationship with the show. The performance that started out so well was marred by technical problems and unfulfilled expectations. What followed was a silence more deafening than any heckler's jeer, the complete cessation of any future booking opportunities. The halt in his appearances brought home in stark reality the total control late-night hosts had in this era, none more powerfully than Carson, over who would appear on his stage. But what was significant about this single performance was that its repercussions went way beyond NBC studios. It revealed something everybody knew but never quite heeded: that late-night television relationships are built upon trust and understanding between the host and performer. The delicate balance, once broken, had severe and immediate consequences, as seen in the case of Mandel. Indeed, this was nothing peculiar to Mandel's case. Carson was notorious for his ability to make or break careers through his booking decisions, and performers knew that keeping him happy meant a sustained life in the entertainment business. The fallout from Mandel's last appearance was a potent reminder of how tenuous success could be in late-night television. A high-wire balancing act between innovation and convention, with one misstep, irrespective of intent or prior successes, serving to banish the performer from the very platform that had built his or her career. This established one reality in which creativity may always remain in check by a degree of caution, even as there is an urge or desire to push the envelope against the risk of falling out of favor with the arbiters of taste for late-night TV. Mandel's story is fine enough drama as it stands on its own, but it only represents one chapter in a long canon of issues connected to late-night TV. It is, of course, comparable to many of Carson's own performances, like his treatment of the impressionist Rich Little, in which Little's impression of Carson led to Little basically being banished from late-night TV for his impression of the late-night TV host, and is even indicative of an established pattern of swift, decisive, and aggressive action against performers who have seemingly crossed whatever boundaries are perceived to be acceptable. And even now, Mandel's experience serves as a cautionary tale for navigating a world where the consequences of ambition and prudence dangle over any ambition to performance. It drove deep a very valid point. In late-night television, success is not solely hinged on talent, or even past success, but the ability to move within a very delicate network of relationships and expectations that define the medium. For Mandel, though, the dramatic turn his career took after that moment became, surprisingly enough, the defining moment in his career arc, a sobering illustration of the eternal verity that in life and entertainment, even a minor mistake can change the course of fate forever. But what happens when two icons, each ruling their own empire of fame, collide under the unblinking gaze of America? Wayne Newton and Johnny Carson. Those are two towering figures whose names instantly evoke memories of America's golden era of entertainment. While Newton commanded center stage in Las Vegas, leading with his powerful vocals, Carson dominated the landscape of late-night television with his razor-sharp wit and clever repartee. On paper, they were kindred spirits, master craftsmen who transcended mere entertainment to define what celebrity meant in their era. In short, their eventual friendship seemed all but a foregone conclusion. At least, that's how it started. As time went on, however, what began as a relationship founded on mutual respect and admiration utterly disintegrated. By the time their feud finally drew to a close, they had suffered one near physical confrontation. The nature of their public profiles would make that sound utterly unbelievable, which is probably partly why their falling out remains so compelling to the public today. So what happened? It wasn't until years later that Wayne Newton finally opened up about the incident during a 2007 interview on Larry King Live. He recalled those old times when he would regularly show up on The Tonight Show, joking around and swapping stories with Carson, whom he considered to be an actual friend. Then, out of nowhere, there were the jokes. Part of Carson's regular monologue at first, they ran the gamut from light teasing to the occasional jab. As time went on, these grew ever more consistent and incessant and mean-spirited. Night after night, Newton found himself becoming the focus of Carson's verbal barbs. From his looks to his height, nothing remained off-limits. To Newton, however, these attacks felt deeply personal, and he couldn't fathom why they were happening. He had done nothing, at least nothing he knew of, to offend Carson. Yet the jokes didn't stop. They just spread like wildfire. Other comedians picked up on them, repeating the same cruel punchlines ad nauseum until they became integral to Newton's public image. Newton couldn't laugh this one off. He spent 1.5 years trying to reach Carson, calling him and asking mutual contacts if they could arrange a conversation that might explain what had gone wrong. But nothing ever came of it, because Carson never returned the calls, and the mockery continued unabated. Finally, Newton had had enough. He told the Las Vegas Review-Journal how much it was bothering him. He was very angry with me and started jokes on his show, he said. And having other comedians join in with those jokes about my lack of manhood, I guess, is the best way to say it. There was no rhyme or reason for it. No truth, in fact, at all. He had been attempting to patch things up this whole time. This time, he made a different choice. When he sat across from Larry King that night, he didn't hold back. "I'm going to say something I've never said on television," Mr. King began. "Johnny Carson was a mean-spirited human being, and there are people that he has hurt that people will never know about. And for some reason, at some point, he decided to turn that kind of negative attention towards me, and I refused to have it." The tension between them finally boiled over into a dramatic confrontation at NBC Studios. Newton, tired of the relentless jokes and Carson's refusal to communicate, marched into Carson's office during a meeting with producer Fred DeCordova. After asking DeCordova to leave, Newton delivered an ultimatum. "I said to Mr. Carson, I don't know what friend of yours I've killed. I don't know what child of yours I've hurt. I don't know what food I've taken out of your mouth. But these jokes about me will stop, and they'll stop now, or I will kick your ass."
Mr. Carson, these jokes about me will stop, and they'll stop now, or I will kick your ass.
The jokes ceased after that, but by then, the damage had been done. Things became even more convoluted when both would-be entrepreneurs set their sights on buying the Aladdin Hotel in 1980. When Newton won the bidding war, Carson and his partner Ed Nigro accused him of having double-crossed them in the deal. This led to further complications for Newton, with rumors surfacing about mafia involvement, allegations that would dog him for years. The fallout from their fight proved to have some lasting effects. Newton eventually sued NBC over the mafia allegations for libel, winning a $5.2 million judgment, the largest libel victory against a news organization in Hollywood history at the time. This victory was somewhat fleeting, though, as a federal appeals court later overturned the decision in 1990. Financial strain from the long battle also helped Newton file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1992. Despite these setbacks, Newton rebuilt his career with a series of lucrative Las Vegas residencies. He is the top-grossing Las Vegas entertainer of history and adopted the title Mr. Entertainment. It's worth noting that Carson passed away in 2005, while the memory of this remarkable feud reminds us of just how quickly things can fall apart, even between the most seemingly compatible personalities in entertainment. But that feud was just one spark in Carson's long trail of fiery encounters. What happened when a Hollywood legend dared to challenge him live on air? Shelley Winters. From the on-screen drama to the off-screen aura, old Hollywood was known for nothing short of drama. While scripted scenes would leave audiences captivated across the world, some of the most memorable moments emerged unexpectedly during live performances. Talk shows, in particular, became notorious hotspots where unscripted confrontations went down in history in this or that way. Among these, Johnny Carson's Tonight Show stood out as one place where celebrities' true personalities often surfaced in the most unpredictable ways. Arguably, the most notorious incident happened during a 1975 broadcast and still thrills audiences today, nearly 5 decades later. What started out as an intriguing guest combination cast 2 dynamic personalities. Academy Award winner Shelley Winters, renowned for her unbridled candor, and British actor Oliver Reed, known for his unconventional responses. As they settled into their seats beside Johnny Carson, the evening promised to be memorable, though no one could have anticipated the dramatic turn events would take. The atmosphere remained genial until Carson asked what appeared to be an innocent question about Americans' perceived intimidation by British people. Reed, never one to refuse a provocative response, responded with a smirk and a statement that would incur controversy immediately. Most of them, you see, we have made love to.
English people in general, they feel a little, I guess, insecure. I don't know.
No, most of them, you see, we made love to.
Most of them.
The comment struck a nerve with Winters, who fired back with calculated precision. I would have remembered. Instead of lightening the mood with humor, Reed poured gasoline on it by implying that she must have simply forgotten.
Most of them.
I would have remembered.
You've forgotten.
A response that would prove to be only the opening salvo in an increasingly hostile exchange. The tension between them mounted as the evening progressed, when Reed, in a self-deprecating moment, referred to his mustache, saying, "Proves I'm not terribly viral." Winters couldn't resist bringing up their earlier tussle with a quick-witted, "I remembered." Reed was noticeably different from that moment on. Each time Winters made a comment, Reed's face contorted in irritation. His growing annoyance was particularly palpable when they discussed American behavioral norms, where Reed concluded a remark toward Winters with, "And some of them are quite loud." Matters came to a head when Reed committed the cardinal sin of live television. He turned to Winters and shushed her audibly during the broadcast. If that weren't enough to get the audience riled up, he then asked them if they thought he was justified in silencing her. When some applauded, one lone boo was enough to give Reed the ammunition to go off on another tirade. "Women's liberation, madam, will never survive. Not while I'm in the kitchen," he said, elevating the hostilities to a new level.
Women's liberation, madam, will never survive. Not while I'm in the kitchen.
Where Winters tried to laugh it off, Reed gave her a stare that froze water. The confrontation reached its dramatic crescendo as Winters stormed to her feet and left the set. But far from providing closure to the exchange, her departure was an interlude rather than the final act. Reed, emboldened perhaps by her departure, turned another barb in Carson's direction. "She's all right. She can't shout at us now. So much for women's lib. Where's the lady who shouted?" It was the second direct attack on the feminist movement that evening from Reed, but he would not let his point lie. Launching into a diatribe about women's roles, Reed argued that women were happier when confined to a domestic context. He believed that professional pursuits outside the home disrupted marital harmony and created unnecessary conflicts regarding domestic responsibilities. Just when you thought the drama was over, the evening had one final, unexpected twist. Without warning, Winters returned to the set, her movements deliberate and purposeful. Reed stood and may have expected either reconciliation or further confrontation. As he was saying something mid-sentence, totally unaware of the reprisal to come, Winters coolly walked up to him and emptied her full drink directly over the top of his head. The liquid flowed down his hair and saturated his suit, making a moment that would etch its way into television history. Reed stood there, soaked, while Winters again turned and walked away, this time for good. But if that confrontation left audiences stunned, what happened next between Johnny Carson and Chevy Chase would redefine late-night rivalry forever. What went wrong? Chevy Chase. The dynamic between Johnny Carson and Chevy Chase is one of entertainment's most fascinating love-hate relationships, which embodies intricacies that can only arise from the high-voltage world of show business. A history spanning decades culminated in what became one of the most remembered confrontations on television. During a particularly tense appearance on The Tonight Show, the moment became electric when Carson broached what sounded like a light-hearted line of inquiry into Chase's recent work as guest host. Chase replied with his signature humor, frankly declaring hosting to be one of the toughest tasks he'd encountered in his career to date. But just when this all seemed very light, Chase brought up a sore subject that had dogged him for many years. The rumors of how Chase would eventually take over from Carson himself. This wasn't just an idle rumor fueled by the sensationalism of the tabloids. At the pinnacle of Chase's meteoric rise on Saturday Night Live in 1976, when he was hardly into his first season, speculation as to his future reached unprecedented levels. The seriously talented and instantly successful young performer fueled speculation among industry pundits that he might take over The Tonight Show. The buzz reached such a fever pitch that New York Magazine featured Chase on their cover, with his catchphrase, "I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not." The headline referred to him as the heir apparent to Johnny Carson after Chase had appeared successfully on late-night shows several times. But Chase's response to the growing pressure proved characteristically impolitic. Confronted by a reporter about his ambitions for Carson's job, Chase made one fateful mistake. His careless comment about being tired of interviewing dumb starlets night after night would prove to be a career-defining blunder. Carson, still smarting from Saturday Night Live, took particular umbrage. He responded with a devastating aside, reportedly telling writer Tom Shales that Chevy Chase couldn't even improvise his way through a bean-eating contest. The biting rejoinder would be writ large in TV history. The consequences of this very public feud were serious and long-lasting. For years after the incident, Chase was virtually blacklisted from appearing on The Tonight Show. Tension between them manifested in awkward silences during rare encounters, subtle barbs exchanged through the media, and carefully crafted insults that never quite crossed the line into outright hostility. Their complicated relationship became a fascinating study in how quickly professional admiration could curdle into personal animosity within the high-pressure world of late-night television. The dynamic between Carson and Chase is a striking reminder that in the entertainment business, success and ego often collide, and professional respect can quickly turn to lasting resentment. From silent grudges to explosive confrontations, Johnny Carson's guest list was as volatile as it was legendary. But behind every laugh and spotlight stood a fragile balance of ego and power. Which feud shocked you most? And do you think Carson was justified or simply protecting his throne? Let us know in the comments below.